Hi, I'm Brian Lee Crowley, Managing Director of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. I'd like to talk to you today about deteriorating public finances, persistent deficits, spiraling national debt, out of control entitlements, and perhaps a coming day of fiscal reckoning, an accumulation of tiny decisions that created a monster no one intended and certainly no one wanted. You think I'm talking about the United States today. I'm talking about Canada in 1994. Yes, Canada, where in less than a decade we transformed ourselves from what the Wall Street Journal called an honorary third world country into an economic and financial outperformer. Not only did we fix our immediate problems, but we set ourselves up for some remarkable payoffs in terms of prosperity and economic growth, ones that helped us weather the recession even better than many other industrialized countries. So, what are the lessons to be learned? We used tools that we already had, tools we can use again to avoid falling into the same fiscal maelstrom. Let's begin with how Canada sleepwalked into trouble the first time. On the top line here, we have Canada's debts as well as government surpluses and deficits. Below, we're showing government spending comparing Canada and the United States. As you can see here, that we were mostly in deficits in the mid-60s until the mid-70s, our economy actually grew faster, so our national debt steadily declined. The size of government wasn't much different compared to the Americans. But softly, spending began to accelerate as the government introduced new entitlements, subsidies, and social programs. By the early years of Pierre Trudeau's government, we were throwing caution to the wind. And so began Canada's decimation of the public purse in a period we call the Gathering Storm from 1973 until 1994. When Canada fell into crisis, it was a profound one. Canada had begun to abandon its traditional discipline, and federal spending increased dramatically. From 15% of the economy in 1965, that's 15 cents out of every dollar in the national economy, to 23% by 1993. Over these 2 decades, it didn't matter what the political stripe of the government was, liberal or conservative. We were in a booming economic period, and yet, still, we announced profligate deficits year after year. In the 1980s, we never even got close to balanced budgets. We were spending to beat the band, and like America today, demonstrating to the world how to live on borrowed time and borrowed money. Imagine what your bank statement would look like if you tried to pull such a stunt. The miracle of compound interest was beginning to decimate the Great White North. Suddenly, we were stuck in a cycle where we were borrowing money just to pay the bills. So let me tell you when things really started to hit the fan. In the mid-1990s, interest costs were eating up nearly a third of federal revenues, leaving less and less money for programs. The Canada Pension Plan looked increasingly unsustainable in the future. Either enormous premium increases or benefit cuts seemed to be the only way to carry the program through the looming retirement of Canada's huge baby boom generation. And the provinces were spending just as hard as the feds. Total provincial spending more than doubled between 1965 and 1993, and provincial debt and its associated interest costs both tripled. Suddenly, the world noticed sleepy little Canada's fiscal crisis. The Wall Street Journal began gleefully mocking our third world status, and politically, we were ripe for reform with a capital R. In October 1993, Jean Chrétien's Liberals came to power in Ottawa. After a year of hesitation, they came to the conclusion that deficits and the debt were not inventions of ideology, but facts of arithmetic, as Finance Minister Paul Martin was soon to remark.
After extensive review, this budget overhauls not only how government works, but what government does. We are acting on a new vision of the role of government in the economy. In many cases, this means smaller government. In all cases, it means smarter government.
Transport, industry, regional development, scientific programs, all were slashed. The number of civil servants working for Ottawa fell dramatically. So what was the key to the overwhelming public acceptance of these measures? An equitable sharing of the pain. All government initiatives were put under program review, the acid test for continued funding being these 6 tests. Progress was impressively rapid. Federal government spending as a share of the economy fell from over 23% in the early 1990s to just a little over 15% by 2008. And beginning in 1997, surpluses became an annual event. Ottawa's debt fell from almost 70% of GDP to just under 30% by 2007. And interest costs followed the same slope down to about 13% of federal revenue, which meant more resources available for programs and for tax relief. A suddenly blooming global economy gave government even more wiggle room, which ultimately allowed cuts to personal and corporate taxes, thereby spurring more private spending. These reforms ushered in a delicious virtuous circle. As the economy grew, revenue grew. Less government spending was then needed. This allowed for further tax relief, which then further stoked the economy, and on and on and on. Canadians demanded that their politicians not stop there. We went on to fix our social welfare system and the Canada Pension Plan. As contentious as parts of this reform were, the results were staggering. A reinvigorated public pension plan, safe from the time bomb of baby boomer retirements, and large numbers of the poor suddenly able to enter the workforce. The proof is in the pudding. In the decade following Ottawa's first balanced budget in a generation, the Canadian economy boomed. Between 1997 and 2008, Canada's real economic growth exceeded the G7 average every year. We became an awesome job-generating machine, and our business investments then followed suit. And the number of people in poverty or living on low incomes declined impressively. Canada even weathered the recent recession better than its G7 partners. The reforms of the 1990s are the gift that keeps on giving, although the soundest banking system in the world didn't hurt us either. Still, what really made the reforms possible was a deep public appetite for them. The Canadian electorate demanded an end to irresponsible public finances and their country's shaming on the global stage. Done in broad daylight, no interest group was able to ask for exemption from reform, and almost none was given. Have a look at this picture one more time, and remember how close we sailed to disaster. And then look over here and see that we're sailing into stormy waters again. Our record proves that Canadians and their politicians can tackle big spending and entitlement problems and wrestle them to the ground. The results were beyond our wildest hopes. We did it once, we can do it again.